One of the things that's sad but true, that sometimes you have to talk about is most marriages. I think we're up to like 55 or 60% of marriages end in divorce in the United States. And if you were to take that, you say, okay, well, more than half will end in a divorce. I would say, especially depending on if it's your first marriage or maybe second marriage, you have kids. You have kids. And Gabe, you have a child. I have kids as well. We've both been divorced. And something that was really, really hard for me and obviously hard for you. And you and I didn't even know each other then. We were kind of going through this. You kind of met me as I was, coming out the other end, so to speak. On mine is just the challenge in some states. And I had no idea until this weekend. It felt like Tennessee was really, really hard and what is in my estimation you should start as long as both parents are good people, right? And love the child, just maybe not one another, or maybe they love one another but can't stay together anymore. You would think that we would start with the 50-50 custody split and then obviously make exceptions for allowances. Maybe a parent has to travel a lot. Maybe, obviously if there's any, abuse there or unsafe situation, you adjust off that. But from the court's eyes, the standard would be 50-50. I know for me, it wasn't anywhere near that. It literally cost me every dime I had saved in my entire life and every single thing that I have ever bought. And at the time, 39 years of existence on this earth, to get my youngest son half of the time. My oldest son came with me in the very beginning and just stayed. But he was 16, so that he doesn't really count. What were some of your experiences? Because I go back 4 years ago. What were some of your experiences? What was the timeline like that for
Well,
you? And why do you think Tennessee and other states in the South, it seems like more predominantly in the South, are this way?
let's start. Let's establish a baseline for this, right? So, for the sake of this discussion tonight, and then the one we're going to do tomorrow night, for the sake of the conversation, let's just assume, because both of us are good people, good parents. We're not abusive. We're not a danger to our children. In fact, quite the opposite. We are caring parents. We want to be involved as much as we can in our children's lives. So let's make the baseline that, right? Because you referenced, you would think most courts would start off 50-50. If the baseline is both parents are caring, they just couldn't work it out. If that's the baseline, most states should start 50-50. So before we get into this conversation, you said like it feels like Tennessee's a lot tougher to get 50-50 custody. And I obviously went through a lot of the same experiences you did through a divorce when you have children and trying to figure out how much time you get. Of course, my daughter lived in Texas, and we'll get really deep into that. But yesterday I was sitting there before I show this graphic. I was sitting there thinking, I know how challenging family law was to me in Tennessee over the course of literally 12 years. In and out of court, 3 different attorneys, went to court 2 times, and this is just to try to get me more time. It wasn't to get full custody. It was just to get me more time, just to get me every other weekend, right? I had to go to court 2 different times. I had to have 3 attorneys. There's a deposition. It was a mess. I'm like, why is it not easier? So I just kind of skimmed around the internet yesterday, and I found a map. And it ranks each state as far as like how many days of the year the father has the child in a situation where parents split custody, right? Like not 50-50, but they just share custody of the child, okay? So I'm going to pull this up real quick, and we're going to try to zoom in if we can on this screen here. So here's the photo. Here's the map of the United States. The darker the blue, right, the more time the father has. The darker the blue, those states are 50-50, okay? And the way this is done is, if you're familiar with family law at all, it's a very ambiguous way to decide how much time a parent gets. You don't go to jury. a judge basically hears testimony from both parties and makes his or her decision based on those few hours in the courtroom, right? Give or take different situations. But if you have to go all the way to family law court, one person decides how much time one parent gets. And a lot of those decisions are based on precedent, right? What has happened up until this point? What were other cases like obviously we're talking about in Tennessee, right? Up to this point. So if you've got judges with a certain mindset, an archaic mindset, such as, well, a woman's a better nurturer, or a child needs their mom more than their dad, or whatever stereotypical tropes that, for the most part, men have put on women, then a lot of times you're going to see that dads get less time in those states. And if you look across the Southeast, from Oklahoma to Arkansas to Tennessee, you get some pretty light blue on this map, right? If you really bear down and look at it, before we get into our personal stories, Tennessee is ranked 50th out of 50 states for how much custody time a father gets. Now, we know there's a lot of different things that play into custody time for a parent, right? There may be more abusive dads in Tennessee, though I doubt it. Maybe there's financial situations. Maybe there's living situations that are untenable on the father's side, and the child can't live with them half the time, right? Because they're moving too much, or they're in and out of jobs, they can't support the child, whatever the case may be. Regardless of that, out of 50 states in America, Tennessee is last in how much custody time the father gets. Now, it's 2024, right? And we are all about being woke and kind of coming around and throwing our hands up and putting our middle fingers up to these archaic ideas of, what Harrison Butker says about women. However, in more conservative states and Republican states, fathers get less time than mothers. And these states generally are more patriarchal states, so to speak, than maybe states in the Northeast, or maybe states on the West Coast, things like that. Maybe more, quote unquote, more liberal states. And if you're a Democrat and you're listening to this, you're like, see, I told you so. Look, Democratic run states aren't that far behind Republican run states. Where you see the majority of 50-50 custody is in swing states. These states that one year they flip for the Republican presidential nominee, one year they flip for the Democratic presidential nominee, right? There is no extreme political party that has taken hold in any of these states. The swing states actually have the best balance for custody. So you asked before I kind of went on this rant about that, what my personal story was. And Chuck, it is fucking long. All right. So, I mean, I don't know if you have any certain questions, but I can tell you the beginning of it. I can tell you the middle of it. And I can tell you.
Well, let's start there. And let's start at the beginning. And let's start with your experience. And I know we're going to do mine on a different podcast, but something you said triggered this in me. And I'm curious if you heard the same thing. All right. So both of us live and got divorced in Madison County, right? Your divorce was in Madison County.
Yes.
At the time of my divorce, and at the time of my divorce, this dude had been here for a long time. So I'm assuming you would have had the same judge. I talked to my attorney and I said, the number one thing is I have to get my youngest son half the time, right? That is the only goal that is, well, and some of this is probably on me for not being more specific. But I said, but this is where we have to land. No matter what, I have to have him half the time. It's not right. He wants to be with me. My oldest son is with me. Like, it only makes sense. And my attorney told me this, and perhaps your attorney told you. He said, Chuck, if this were in Weakley County, I could get you 50-50. And Weakley County is just a couple of counties over from us, just 30, 45 minutes down the road. Okay, still in the same state, still in Tennessee. And he said, if this were in Weakley County, I could get you 50-50. He's like, but with this particular judge, and we won't call his name, in Madison County.
No. Yes, we will. We will call names. Okay. Absolutely.
All
yes,
right.
It's Jimmy Butler, who is retired now. Thank Christ that he's not up there ruling. Was that the judge you were going to say?
It was the same one, and he told me, he said, "The best I can get you is gonna be, if we're lucky, 6 out of 14 days." And he said, "And that's if we go in front of him." He's like, "It may be closer to 5." And I said, "Neither one of those are gonna work because that's 2 days a month." My son at the time, my youngest son was 8, that's 24 days, a year times 10 years, that's 240 days. I'm almost gonna lose a year of my kid's life for some bullshit, right? But again, if we would have gone just a couple of counties over, we would have started, in his estimation, with that particular judge at 50-50. So the point being is, this is the states are the counties are different depending on what judge you get, and I think that's really bullshit too. This needs to be a standard from the capital of whatever state you're in, and they need to say, look, this is our jumping off point. Now, we are going to, we're paying you money, so you're going to look at each case individually. You would feel like you would look at each case individually. If there are extenuating circumstances, you would make adjustments off of that. But because of the county I was in and the length of time, and I asked my attorney, and I'm sure you asked yours, I said, why is he that way? I was like, my kid wants to be with me half the time. I wasn't trying to get full custody. I was trying to get half custody. And he told me, he was like, well, Judge, he said the word, he's just kind of old school with the school of thought. Why are we accepting this? Why is this okay? Why are more dads? This pissed me off the whole time. Why are more dads in the state? Our state is controlled by upper middle-aged white men. How come none of them are making decisions out of Nashville fixing this?
Because they ain't divorced. Most of them aren't. And if they were, and here's the thing, because listen, the last attorney I had, right, was up for the chancellor position. And do you know who appoints that position? When Judge Butler retired, do you know who appointed Steve Maroney into that position?
I do.
Yeah, Bill Lee. Governor Lee. Right.
Oh, wow.
So this is why a lot of this shit doesn't change. Okay. It's whoever has the most connection. Steve Maroney is now in the place where Jimmy Butler was. He was president of the fucking Republican Party here for a long time. Right. So I'm not saying that's why he got that job, but that's probably why he got that job. So I can promise you that things aren't as impartial and as clean as you think they would be in a situation where you have parents and kids involved. Like, you would think it would be cleaner. You think there'd be an easier way to figure out who gets custody, because you are not the first person that I have heard say that about Chancellor Butler. In fact, all 3 of my attorneys told me the same thing. You don't know what he's going to do at any given moment. And when we dive in a little bit further into my personal story, you won't believe it. And I don't know if I've told you this. I haven't shared this at length anywhere before, ever. I've told bits and pieces of it, right? But I've never shared the whole thing.
Well, I'm very curious to hear about this. So let's start in the beginning. And divorces are hard. I had no idea how hard it was, right? I knew that I wanted one. I knew my ex-wife wanted one. I knew that we were together 19 years, which is a very long time. We were very young when we got together, all that kind of stuff, right? Our marriage had been over for years, right? And it's still the emotional toll it takes on both of you, I'm sure, is really, really hard. Just the decision to leave, if you're the one to make the decision, it really doesn't matter, because you're either the one leaving or the one that was left. It's like just that decision is so hard. And I feel like, at least for me, and I'm sure it's the same way for you, you're like the whatever day it is you do it, you're emotionally spent and taxed right then. And that's just when this process gets going.
Yeah, divorce is hard. Somebody, I forgot where I read it. I think I read it in a book I'm reading. A character says, getting divorced is hard. Being divorced is great. And I think that's exactly right. The process of it is miserable, regardless of how bad the marriage is or whatever else. The process of divorce is miserable. When you have a kid involved,
and maybe it should be. And maybe it should be. It's a very serious thing.
Yeah, it is. But then I think there are cases where it could be celebratory if you're in an abusive situation or whatever. But if you're leaving that, it's sad because you're in it to begin with. So yes, I mean, obviously, getting divorced is difficult. Being divorced is nice. And I can say that from experience too, right? Like getting divorced is hard. Being divorced, it's that was okay. But when there's a child involved, it's very difficult. So to start with my story, I got divorced in 2008. I've been divorced twice as long as I was ever married. Right, I've been divorced for what is that? 2008, 16, 7. Wait, 16 years. I was married for 8. So yeah, twice as long. When we got divorced, my daughter was a year and a half old. Um, my ex-wife asked for a legal separation, and she asked for permission to go to Texas because her family was there. And I said, okay. It was a 6-week legal separation. I signed it, allowing her to leave the state. And
Did you
she
have an
got to
attorney
Texas.
review it?
No, I didn't get an attorney the first time, which is on me. That's my fault, right? Because in my mind in 2008, the reason we were getting a divorce is because I had an affair and it was my fault, and I had tremendous amount of guilt. So I just said, whatever you need, you take it. Like
Yep.
you need 6 weeks in Texas to figure this out. What you want, that's fine. She gets to Texas. I stay here. She files from Texas for divorce. She's down there. I don't know that she's established a residency. She's living with
I
her,
was just about to ask that.
her brother and
Can you
sister-in-law.
file from a state you don't have residency in?
No, and because I was still in Tennessee, it came under Tennessee law. But again, I didn't have an attorney. So I just said, you want a divorce? Okay. And look, I regret the way I got divorced. I don't regret getting a divorce. I regret not getting a lawyer. So those are sort of the three linchpins to the first part of this. I regret the way my marriage ended. I don't regret that it ended. And I wish I would have gotten a lawyer to give me advice on that front end. So what we decided when my daughter was a year and a half old is we kind of created this parenting plan. And Chuck, I had 48 days out of the year that were given to me, right? So for 320 something days, my ex-wife had my daughter. I will say she was good about, even though it wasn't on paper, she was good about letting me have my daughter up here 1 week a month, even if the days didn't necessarily match up on the parenting plan. Okay. So my daughter would come here 1 week every month up until she started kindergarten. Now I knew once she started kindergarten that she wasn't going to be able to come up here a week every month. Right. So I had to change the parenting plan. Now, even though I only had 48 days, and if you've been divorced in Tennessee, you know the child support is calculated based on the mother's income, the father's income, the amount of days that each one has with the child. And they work into a formula, and that's what you pay. So I only had 48 days. I think at the time my ex-wife filed for divorce, she was unemployed, so she put down she was making like $35,000 a year. I was paying about $850 a month plus daycare. So I was going over $1,000 a month just that I was paying. And we did that from about 2008 until right around 2012. And that is when I hired a lawyer for the first time.
And so your daughter at this time would have been 5 or so, because it happened when she was a year and a half.
She was about to start kindergarten. And I reached out to her mom first, and I said, hey, listen, I know she can't keep coming up here a week every month. What do we need to do? What can I do? And I think, what I don't want this to be, I don't want this to be a situation where I'm shit talking her mother a lot. I don't want to do that. But just for purposes of authenticity, I've just got to say what happened. Okay. She wasn't budging on that because she had control in the situation. She knew I didn't have an attorney. The parenting plan greatly benefited her from a time standpoint.
And the parenting plan was written up. Did she have an attorney?
Yeah.
Or was this something? Okay, so she had an attorney. You didn't have an attorney.
Right.
The parenting plan.
She had an attorney. I did not have an attorney. So in 2008, we were going off the parenting plan for that same parenting plan for 4 years. And as my daughter got older, I was going to Texas a lot more. I was wanting to see her more, obviously. And not that I didn't, not that I didn't want to see her when she was a year and a half. But when you're in your, a year and a half, there's a big difference in a year and a half old and a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, right? You're having conversations and like it's a whole person, and
Right.
they're growing up, and you want to
Things that
be
she can remember her whole life versus she
right.
doesn't remember anything from a year and a half.
Yeah, no, and I knew I needed to get a lawyer, and so the first lawyer I ever hired was Mike Casey. We went to high school together. He does the divorce in corporate. I don't know what it's called now. I think they changed their name. And
Good call.
I went to have a consultation with him June of 2012. Okay. We did not get the new parenting plan officially signed and settled until January of 13, because that's how this shit works in the legal system. Things will drag and drag and drag. We didn't even go to court. We ended up settling in mediation, and this is what I settled for. I settled for 1 weekend guaranteed a month for me to go to Texas and exercise my parenting time, with a flex weekend built in that my daughter's mom had to approve. I wanted every other weekend, and I would pay my expenses to drive down to Texas or fly or however I got there, pay my room and board, pay for a meal, whatever. But she did not want to give me the second weekend. So we said it's a flex weekend, which means if I ask for it and there's not a reasonable reason I shouldn't have it, then she gives it to me. But it's still up to her to give it to me. And for the most part, that worked out okay. I also got 3 phone calls a week from 5 to 5:30. It was timed, right? So I had to get on the phone at 5, and we had to hang up at 5:30. If I had a ball game to referee, or if I had something come up, if Jordan had something she had to do, the call wasn't rescheduled. I just missed
And
it.
how old was she in this time frame again?
Kindergarten, 5, 6. So we held on to this parenting plan until about 2015. So about 3 years, it worked fine. At some point in that 3 years, my ex-wife got remarried, and anytime that happens, and this is not a bad thing, but anytime that happens, then you have a whole new dynamic that's sort of thrust into this situation, because now you've got another adult in the house with his own kids and their own schedules, and now schedules get really tight and sort of conflicting, but the rules stayed the same. So they had my phone call time was from 5 to 5:30, and apparently their dinner time was around the same time. So my daughter was having to have her conversation with me on the phone at the family dinner table, which was kind of difficult.
Only 3 days a week.
Only 3 days a week. Only 3 days a week.
And this is something a mediator, just for everybody to know. So, because I went to mediation too, right? The mediator writes it up. You go back, forth, back, forth. It's very high level negotiation. And spoiler alert: if you have a penis, you'll lose everything you ever had. And they go back, forth, and then they still send it. Judge Butler still had to sign off on mine, right? So yours seems to be pretty egregious. 3 phone calls a week? Like, that's nuts. But a judge still signed off on it. Now, did they read the whole thing? Probably not. I bet they have pretty close to 100% chance of just signing off on anything if it gets through mediation. But you would think part of your job would be, it's kind of like how nurse practitioners can write you a script, but a doctor's still got to look to make sure they're not writing you too many pills, right? That's the idea. You would think a judge would look at this and say, okay, wait a minute, this doesn't look right. You would hope a judge would do that.
I'd be willing to guess that most judges, because here's the thing, if it goes through mediation, then both parties agree. It's not perfect for either party, but that's the idea. Everybody kind of gives up something. Mm-hmm. Because what I came in with, I wanted 5 phone calls a week, and the counter was like 1 a week. And so that's why I got 3, right? Because that's just how mediation is, right? Because you don't want to go to court. And I was so naive at the time, I didn't know. What I was thinking about, because my finances were so tight, I can't afford to go to court. Like, that was another thing. Yeah. Like, I didn't have the money to kind of keep this going. Mediation's expensive as hell, and hourly charges from an attorney are expensive. So I was like, look, if we can settle this, because this is what I really wanted in this situation is I wanted my phone calls to be unimpeded. I didn't want her to have to sit at the damn dinner table and talk to me while she tried to eat her food and hear all the other conversation going on. Like you just had, I mean, that's
For a
untenable.
6-year-old kid, that's just a lot of stimulation.
Yes, I mean, and there's things that she doesn't want to talk like that. Maybe she would want to talk to me about that she doesn't want to say in front of the other parent, right? I mean, there's all kinds of things that are wrong with that. Or she was at her stepbrother's karate practice and it was 5 o'clock, so that's when the phone call was, and that's just what we had to do, and it was just loud, and it just wasn't working. And then my flex weekend started to get denied. So, we were used to doing the every other weekend thing, going to Texas, whatever. And then those flex weekends started to get, I would ask for it and I would be told no, but I wouldn't be given a reason. So then after we were used to either, 1 week a month, and then she turned to kindergarten, it was every other weekend. Obviously her summers were spent here, every other break, right? We alternated years for spring breaks. For my fall break, I was a teacher. I would spend a week there, and Jordan stayed with me in our rental house down there, or hotel or whatever we stayed in. I would take her to school and do all that. So that was nice. But even still paying for a, fucking suite for a week, it's expensive.
In Texas.
Child support and things like that. And my parents helped me, right? Which I am eternally grateful to them for that. So I hire a different lawyer besides Mike for this next time because the phone call situation wasn't working. The flex weekend started to be denied. So I hire another lawyer and we do the whole thing again. Mediation. All I want in the mediation is unimpeded phone calls, and I want 4 of them a week. That's it. That is all. And I thought this will be easy. Like we'll just put a little pressure on her. She'll say, sure, take four phone calls a week. We'll change the times. I'll be a little more flexible, whatever. Man, she just buckled down on it. So we couldn't get anywhere. So I was like, all right, we'll just go to court. Right? So mediation doesn't work. The next step is court. I've never been in family law court. I don't know what to expect at all. And we go to court. My daughter has to drive all the way up here for court.
And she's what age right at
Wait,
this time?
No. I'm sorry. That's the first. No, the second. That was the second time. First time, she did not. She did not come up here the first time. I don't think. That was the second time. First time we're in court all day. It's like 6 hours, and all I am asking. Well, since we went to court, I said, "Look, shit. If we're going to court, then I'm going for every other weekend. Like if we're going to go for this, then I want every other weekend in stone. No more flex weekends where she can say no. I want every other weekend, and I want a phone call 4 times a week. That's all. Like I wasn't trying to get custody. That's all I wanted, and I would drive or fly to Texas every other weekend. I just wanted time. I even said I won't change the child support. We can keep the child support like it is. I will still pay you like I'm only getting her 1 weekend a month. Don't even add those extra whatever how many days they are. Just keep the child support. I just want time." So we go and we're in court in Chancellor Butler's court, and we give our the whole thing. I can't remember word for word what happened, but my lawyer questioned my daughter's mom, and she questioned me. My ex-wife's attorney questioned me, questioned her. It was an all-day deal. We get to the end of it, and I can remember Judge Butler like lecturing both of us. And the things that he said made me think like, was he even listening to what we spent 6 hours discussing? He looked at me and he's like, "You just can't go to Texas anytime you want to." And in my head, I'm like, motherfucker, I never said I wanted to go to Texas anytime I wanted to. I said first and third weekend. That's all I'm wanting. And just 4 phone calls. That's not during dinner. That is literally all I asked for. So he kind of gives us this whole lecture, right? Like finger wagging at both of us for whatever reason. And God knows, I don't know why I finger wag my wife, because ex-wife, she didn't really do anything. She's just there. And so he's like, I'll have a decision on this sometime next week. This was in February. We don't hear shit from him for like 2 months. Finally,
Are
my
you
attorney called.
calling, having your attorney check in with
Yeah,
him?
but
How
they're
does
just
that
kind of
work? Can
like,
you call the judge, send him an email? I mean, what happens?
we're waiting too. It's kind of weird. It's just one of those things. They don't want to piss it. They got to go in front of this guy all the time for other clients, right? Like they don't want to. They don't want to
Yeah, but are
piss
you
him.
worried that maybe he dropped your file?
Yes, no, because when my lawyer calls me back. So here's the deal. And this is the shit that's so crazy about this. My lawyer calls me back and she says, "I don't know what happened." So what do you mean? She said, "You lost. He took away time. He took away time from you."
And you were getting 1 weekend a month
I was getting 1 weekend a
and
month
3 phone calls a week, 5 to 5:30, no matter what the situation.
and a flex weekend, right? Remember that flex weekend that she could approve or
And a
deny,
flex
which she
weekend.
was approving for a while and then started to deny. She said, you have 1 weekend a month. You can only have 4 flex weekends for the whole year, right? Where I had 1 flex weekend per month. You have 4 for the whole year. You don't have 3 phone calls a week. You have 2. Your daughter's time in Tennessee in the summer was cut by 2 weeks, from 6 weeks to 4.
Oh my God.
I cannot the time I exercise, my parenting time I exercised in Texas during my fall break and spring break, taken away. I could not, if I wanted to use that, nope, let me back up because I tried that. I tried to use one of my flex visits for a whole week and it got denied. So flex visits only applied to weekends. My weeks of spring break and fall break where I exercise parenting time down there got taken away, right? So I lost, you want to say that's 6 days, that's 12 days, and then whatever the flex weekends were, so 12 times 2, 24. I lost about 50 or 60 days off of the revamped parenting plan that we had done in 2012, when I think I'd gotten up to about 90. So now it's back down to about 40 something. Now, to keep in mind, at this point, my daughter's about 8 years old, 8 or 9. This would have been in 2015, so she was 8. So she's been used to this schedule. We've all been used to this schedule. And now, all of a sudden, she sees me less. She comes to Tennessee less.
Almost cut in half.
Yeah, almost cut in half. No explanation. I'm like, and so that
Nothing on your part, no arrest, no nothing.
No. I have no criminal record, despite what Representative Todd says. I've never been arrested. I have no criminal. I've never ever in my life. Hell, I've maybe raised my voice at my daughter once, and I changed tone, and she cried. She was like 4. She was like, "I don't like you when you talk like that." I was like, "I'm just changed my tone. I didn't yell." No, there's nothing, and that's the frustration with the family law system and the way it's set up. You have a judge who hears both parents or whatever in the span of like a few hours, and then they make a decision based on their own personal belief system, I guess, for lack of a better word. And I know that's not all of them. I know all of them aren't like that. But I was told multiple times after this case, and when I told people what happened, they're like, "Oh, that's not surprising. That's what he does. That's what Judge Butler does. He sides with the mom the majority of the time." And what was so frustrating about that is I had no recourse, right? Well, okay, I did have recourse and I took it. But in that moment, you're powerless. There's nothing you can do unless you want to spend more money. Because with the legal system, everything costs something, right? Nothing's free. So I was just like, I don't know what am I going to do? Call around some attorney friends. They're like, "You can appeal this," right? So you got to pay for that, of course. And I think my parents helped me pay for that. And we sent this case to the appellate court in Tennessee. It finally got to them. The ruling was made in March of 2016. The appellate court heard the appeal in January of 17. And in March of 17, a year later, I take it back. They heard the appeal in February. They made their ruling in 20 minutes. They overturned it. So we went back to the original parenting, like the parenting plan we'd worked out in 2012. So all of that for nothing, we go back. And so for that year, though, from
And you
2000,
lost a year, though.
yeah, I lost a year. I got creative with some of that flex time, though, and the way I sort of spent it and used it. And it sort of worked out where and look, man, that fall break, I went down there anyway. I went to her Girl Scout thing. I did her soccer practices. Like I was around, she just wasn't staying with me, like she usually would. But I went to her school and volunteered, which is what I would do anyway on the Fridays that I would exercise my parenting time when she was in elementary school. I volunteered at school, worked in her classroom, things like that. I was just present. I was just around. And so 2017, we kind of get back into this groove, and
We're back
the
to
older,
3 phone calls a week here.
yeah, 3 phone calls a week. And the older she got, though, the more she wanted to be here and the more she wanted to be around me. And in 2019, 2019, I hired my third lawyer, my third family attorney, because I wanted every other weekend, and not flex weekend, not 3 phone calls a week. I wanted every other weekend. And that was a process. My last lawyer was like a bulldog. She made my ex-wife cry. She was rough. She was very good at what she did. We had a deposition. Let me back up. I'm sorry. This is so convoluted. The reason I hired my third lawyer is because Southwest started flying direct from Memphis to Dallas at a time when I could use that flight, right? My school where I was teaching at the time worked with me. They gave me 4th period planning. I was done teaching at 12:30. They knew every other Friday, as soon as I got done teaching my last class, I was getting on the road and catching a plane to Dallas from Memphis. And usually that plane would leave around 4. So it was a tight window for me to make my flight. But the parenting plan said I had to pick up my daughter when school let out on Fridays. And because my ex-wife went strictly by the parenting plan, she wasn't going to allow me to get Jordan unless I got her from school. I finally convinced her to make it at 6 o'clock. And she said, okay, but if you're not here at 6, you can't get her until the next morning. So there was a night in 2018 where Dallas had like record rainfall, flash flood, like it was nuts. Plane lands. I don't know how it didn't get delayed. I get my rental car, and I'm like hauling ass from DFW to Plano, where they live. It's about a 30-minute drive if things are perfect. But I'm landing at 4:30, maybe 5, rush hour, pouring rain. I'm driving 85 miles an hour down the city road in Plano, trying to get to the house by 6 o'clock. I get there at 6:02, go to the door, no answer. Can't get her. Don't get her. Have to wait till the next morning. So I get her Saturday, and that's fine. But we lost a whole night when my time's already limited. So I'm like, fuck it. Like, I'm not doing this shit anymore. So that is when I went and hired my third lawyer. We had the deposition, the mediation. We can't agree on anything, and it's scheduled to go back to court. Judge Butler's court. And there had been rumors he was retiring. That motherfucker, like, is ageless, right? He's like Emperor Palpatine.
For the longest time.
He is just hanging on, right? Look, people love power. They're going to hang on to that shit as long as they can. So he's hanging on to it. We go to court that day. This is the time Jordan had to come up. Her stepdad's there. It's this whole thing.
How old's Jordan now? She's 13 in this time frame?
Yeah. And she's old enough to go back there and talk to him. But I'm still nervous.
And does she do that?
Well, we get there, and thank God my ex-wife's attorney was like, listen, you need to take this settlement. You need to take this, what they're offering right now. Because the evidence against her, especially with the 6 o'clock pickup thing, all of that, I think was so damning that anybody in their right mind, a judge, would have been like, this is crazy. This guy's traveling 500 miles, paying for his own plane ticket, still paying child support, paying for lodging, all of that. He just wants time. Like, he probably would have given it to me. That being said, I didn't trust him at all. I did not want this thing to have to go to court, but we're standing there. He's about to walk in, and at the last minute, Jordan's mom agrees to whatever we want. Not whatever we want, right? Like, there was some caveats in there. But I got every other weekend. I got 4 phone calls Monday through Thursday. They were flexible. Of course, she didn't have her own phone, right? So I still had to call like the house or whatever. And it was working. Like, we were in a groove. And from February of 2020, right before COVID hit, is when this went into effect. And for the next year, in 3 months, I was in Texas every other weekend. And then in 2021, my daughter was 14, about to start high school, and she basically forced her mom's hand, and moved up here to live with me full time. But to get to that point cost, literally, and you know this, and you'll talk about this tomorrow night, thousands and thousands of dollars, time. If I, which I never would, but if I counted how much money I spent going to Texas, back and forth, and lodging and all of that, like, there's no tens of thousands of dollars over a span of, from the time she was a year and a half until she was 14. So for about 13 years, back and forth. And even her living here, it was a struggle to get the legal aspect of it worked out, but that was honestly the easiest part of it, because at that point, I even think her mom knew there was nothing to fight over. Like, this is what Jordan wanted. She was 14 at the time, and at that point, kids are old enough to advocate for themselves and what they want and communicate that. And I think if you're a loving parent and the situation is okay, in the other parent's house, I think you want to do what, not necessarily what your child wants, but what your child needs. And I think, to her mom's credit, she recognized that. And that's where we are now. And it's honestly, like, for the last 3 years have been the happiest 3 years of my life. For so long, I miss doing the regular things a parent gets to do, like make a lunch. And you try to fabricate these things. I did when I was in Texas, volunteering at her school, making her lunch in this fucking hotel room, before she goes to her kindergarten class. Chuck, I would get up when she was in kindergarten. I would wake up 2:30 in the morning, and I would drive to get to her lunch shift on time, so I could be a lunchroom monitor at her elementary school, right? So I could see her friends, or I could cut out fucking snowmen from the laminating machine. But I think those are the things that you just do. I think any parent would just do that, and I think that's what, like, blows my mind when I see dads who don't do shit, and probably
Yes.
because they don't do shit, they influence the way a judge like Judge Butler thinks about all men. And that's unfair, right? That's archaic.
All right, let's pause there
Okay.
for a second, because I've gotten a million thoughts, and that is an amazing story. And what you said is exactly right. More so than any situation that I can think of, this pisses me off more than anything else I can think of. And maybe it's because I've experienced it. Maybe it's because you've experienced it. You've told the story of just all the hardships that you had taken and hoops that you had to jump through. But it doesn't make me pissed off at Judge Butler. It does. But it doesn't. It's the countless men. It is somehow how, and in Tennessee, dads get 21.8% of the time. 21.8%. That's 50th out of 50th. That's dead ass last. in the state of Tennessee. And there aren't enough people talking about it. Now, depending on where you're listening to this, Mississippi, 23%, Georgia, 23%, Oklahoma, 22%. So literally just a little bit. They're 49. It's the weak ass men in all of these states, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Georgia, Tennessee. Men control the legislature. They just do. They just do. And I understand most of them haven't gotten divorced, but all of them want to be reelected. And the fact that men aren't talking about this, the fact that men have made this so easy to exist, the fact that men go there and they bullshit the 5 out of 14 days, then they don't pick the kids up, or, oh, I've got to work. I work all the time, or, oh, the alimony's too high. Oh, shut your fucking mouth. This guy right here, you literally on a teacher's salary with amazing parents that help, but on a teacher's salary, left at 2:30 in the morning, bought plane tickets, stayed in hotel rooms, dealt with an 6:02, 2 minutes late in a rainstorm. All of these things you dealt with, those are the sacrifices you made, and you would do them again tomorrow. I know you would. And I would, and everybody out there that is worth a damn would. But why are we comfortable living somewhere, living in a town where the men don't? Where, like, what can you not do? I couldn't. I didn't grow up with a dad, right? I didn't grow up with a dad, so I had a very strong single mom, but she was never a dad. She tried, she did as many things as she can, and she married a whole bunch of dudes, but it was never. She could never be a dad. So I would never suggest that you could be a mom or I could be a mom. But what you can be is 100% of a dad, just like the mom can be 100% of a mom. And when you tell your story, I think of two things, and I did not think of this when I went through a divorce, and it cost me a whole lot of grief, whole lot of depression, which are things I didn't normally talk about, a whole lot of anxiety, loss of creativity, loss of confidence. And this is from a divorce I wanted. I was like, what the hell's going on here, right? I wanted this. My ex wanted this. But because of a divorce is a death. I've heard my therapist say this. A divorce is a death. And it is a death of a relationship. Now, when you have kids, it can't be, it can't be a complete death. The fact that we live in anywhere, but especially Tennessee, but anywhere, why we don't say, look, we're going to start with 50-50 time. We're also going to start with therapy, individual parent therapy. I don't care, because everyone, even if you do, what's the little tagline people use now? Irreconcilable differences.
Right.
Even then, you start with therapy because you've got a child. And it's one of those things that had I done that, and had you and your ex done that, some of this, even though you love your daughter, she loves your daughter, some of these decisions made, and of course tomorrow night you're just going to get my experience with it. My ex has a different one. Tonight we just got your experience with it. Your ex has a different one. But like, therapy would have been good here. Healing, because it's hard to not be angry at somebody. That's the only way at 6:02 you're like, sorry, man, you missed your time. That's the only way. Well, if it's dinner time at 5 o'clock, you can't make the phone call at 5:30. Like, it's because it's still there is a personal connection. And I really like it what my therapist says, that a divorce is a death, because you do have to move past that completely. And it took me time to do that. Never wanting my ex back, and I don't think she ever wanted me back. But to move to a point to where you can look at that and appreciate that person for giving you the humans that you created, right? For giving you those things. But that doesn't just happen on its own a lot of times. And I blame the legislators a little bit for not taking this more seriously, when 55+% of all marriages end in divorce. Most of those marriages do have children associated with them. And I get mad at the dads. Men control, especially in the state of Tennessee, pretty much everything. Pretty much everything. Why is this not a thing? These people, even Nashville, even if they're not divorced, they want to get reelected. They got to have divorced votes voting for them to keep them there. Why aren't more people talking about this? Why is it more being done? Why are we 50th out of 50 states?
That's the thing. I think that's what I want this to create, hopefully, or these avenues of conversation. Like if you're a man and you've been screwed over by the family law system, like speak up. And it took me a and I think there's that happens for a few reasons. One, I think there might be fear of retribution if you have to go back to court again. Look, for me, I was God, and when I first found out, this is 2016, when I first found out about his ruling, I I got so close to just like blasting all of this all over social media, writing a column about it, whatever. But then I thought, shit, if I've got to go back in front of that guy, like
Right.
it's going to kill me. I can't say a word. And then also, like I said, this is the first time I've told everything about this. I say everything as much as I could in 45 minutes. Um, there was part of me too that didn't want to air a lot of this stuff out about my ex-wife, because even if she was doing some really dumb shit, like the 602 thing, like the making my daughter talk at the dinner table during a phone call, things like that. I know how I look at people who air dirty laundry publicly about their ex spouses, and I'm like, I don't want to be that person either. So, I think there's a lot of reasons that people don't speak out. But again, in the end, this isn't about my ex-wife. It is tangentially, because she's the one who made decisions that sort of forced my hand to make other decisions, about hiring lawyers and things like that. But it's not about her. This is more about me as a single dad who only wanted time. I didn't want less child support. I didn't want, to, like I said, to pay less or to shirk my responsibility. Anyway, I literally just wanted more time, and I couldn't even get that from a judge. And I don't, and that's something else my lawyer said too. I think judges are predisposed, and maybe I'm just giving him the benefit of the doubt. I think judges may be predisposed to seeing just a lot of pieces of shit fathers in the courtroom.
And they
And
do, and I'm
yeah,
sure, but I don't care. Like
no,
it
no,
just it doesn't matter. And yes, you are right. And that is a problem. And that is the biggest problem. Like on these podcasts, we haven't even, delved into this, but you're an educator and have been in education your whole professional career. Um, like we talk about the impact on youth of fatherless homes and all of these things and what the statistics and the data show you for all the troubles that we all bemoan everywhere. But then you create this. Now conversely, I think that you have a responsibility. I mean, I think, and so this isn't like, oh, men. No, all the dads out there who aren't using their time, who are saying, look, I'm sorry, I've got a work trip to go on, or I'm sorry, I can't pick them up this Wednesday for dinner. Go get them. I'm not saying jail. I'm saying, hey, adjust the calendar. Go get more money. Do whatever it is you need to do. I was raised by a single mom. I get it. By a dude that didn't pay child support, right? And we were dirt ass poor. So make the men more responsible too. Somebody has to be responsible for the child. Somebody has to be, and the court system should start there. They should start in a place, in my opinion. We realize if we're about to do the whole big umbrella thing, the four umbrellas stacked on each other, obviously, two-parent home, married parents, that's ideal, right?
sure.
But 55% of marriages end in divorce, and we know that. So shouldn't the next umbrella under these umbrellas, shouldn't the next one be all things being considered, both parents wanting to be in the child's life, 50-50 time. If someone abuses that, then we make adjustments on there. The family court is a whole huge system. I've had guys that work for me that have had child support had to be taken out of their checks, and it takes me 4 times as long to do their payroll as it is anybody else's, because I've got to put case numbers on the check, and they're like 12 digits. I got to put their social security number, their address. I got to. I mean, it's just all of this stuff. Family law is its own machine. You could go and you could make adjustments when there are violations, when men violate it, or when women violate it. But I think it's important enough, because you're never going to get that year back. You're never going to. Now, your story worked out in a wonderful way because you got your daughter. But there's so many dudes that are already stressed. And as men, for me, people who pretend to be tough, right? People who don't really know how to say, "Holy shit, I'm depressed. Holy shit, I'm defeated." I never really knew what that felt like. And I got my son half the time, but I literally gave up everything I've ever owned in my life. Literally left with a trailer on the back of the truck full of shit, had to start all over again, right? And I was lucky, had some decent people, around me that helped me a little bit. But even then, I couldn't talk to because I didn't even know the words to say. I was so depressed. I was so down. And I didn't even realize what it was. And then so you try to look through other outlets and other venues to fill that up. And it's taken me years. And so I can see, not excusing the men who are shitty parents, but I can see how people get defeated and stay defeated in that arena because we don't start on a level playing field in states like Tennessee. Now it's crazy. You go an hour and a half north in Kentucky, boom, you start at 50-50. In states like Tennessee, you start with 21.8% of the time. That's going to make your child support go up, right? And it's not everything's not all about money, but it's going to make your child support go up. You may have to work more, maybe harder for you to see your kid, right? Versus if you're paying 50-50 versus
Sure. Yep.
21.8% of the time. You're going to lose out on all of those memories, and if you're missing out on 78% of your kid's life, and then here comes another guy, which is going to happen. People get remarried. I got remarried. You haven't, but you may one day, who knows?
Well,
That introduces another dynamic. You can't tell me. I mean, if I was seeing my son 20% of the time, my youngest son, I'd have a conniption.
yeah.
I'd have a conniption. Now, he's got a nice stepdad. He's good to him as far as I know, and my son likes him, so I'm happy. But I get him half the time. I can tell you, I'd be a lot less happy if I was only seeing him 20% of the time. He'd keep me up at night.
It's hard. Like it was one of those things that I look back on now. And humans are resilient. I think we can push through a lot more than we think we can when we're in the situation. Um, Looking back at those 10 to 12 years, though, there were behaviors, whether it was drinking, um, there were behaviors that I was exhibiting, that I was choosing to do. Looking back now, we're clearly coming out of a place of anxiety, depression, whatever I was dealing with. Because the thing about it is, like, for me, it's one or two things. My daughter lived in Texas. I looked at moving down there three different times. In Texas, it's interesting. They are a little bit more willing to go the 50-50 route, but here's where they differ in Tennessee. Their child support setup is different. And I met with two different lawyers down there. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about moving here. Tell me about your family law system in Texas. They said, as far as visitation goes, you could probably get 50-50. However, child support isn't based on the amount of time you have. It's essentially based on who the primary caregiver is. That usually goes to the mom 9 times out of 10, if all things are equal in the situation. And the dad would be required to pay full child support, not 50-50. Because in Texas, apparently, and this is where family law gets tricky because it's based on precedent. In Texas, what they were seeing was a lot of dads who were wanting 50-50s just so they wouldn't have to pay child support. So
Right.
they would get the 50-50, but then they wouldn't exercise their parenting time half the time, but they wouldn't have to pay
Right.
anything. So they're like, oh, okay, we can fix this. We'll give you your 50-50, but you still got to pay the full amount. So when I heard that, I was like, well, shit, man, I can barely buy a house down there because things were so much more expensive. And by the way, Jackson at the time when I was looking at moving down there, houses weren't selling for 250,000 like they are now, right? They were selling for 73,000. So I could have sold my house here, downsized to a house half that size in a real sketchy neighborhood in Dallas, and still paid more for it. Like I was very hamstrung, I guess, for financially to try to figure out how to move down there. So I never pulled the trigger because I couldn't afford to do it. Um, and like you said earlier, it worked out for me. I was lucky. But the tricky thing about family law, and the reason that I think we're stuck in Tennessee, is because of the same precedents. And until a judge decides to kind of like maybe the weekly county judge or maybe somebody else, until they decide to start doing things differently, and then more judges say, okay, hey, maybe we shouldn't start out with the every other weekend as the baseline. Maybe we should start out at 50-50. If things are,
Right.
copacetic all the way across the board, then things can start to change, but it doesn't look like anything's happening in that direction, at least around here. Maybe it's a good thing that Butler's gone now. Maybe it will change a little bit.
I mean, maybe, but should it matter on the county when it's something like this, right? In all of these states, we talk about protecting children, doing what's right for children, two-parent homes, fatherless homes, whatever buzzword you can think of, right? It's sort of all applicable here. It's already a behemoth. It is a machine. Family law is a machine in the state of Tennessee. Why wouldn't we start? Hey, here's 50-50. All right, look, Dad, you're not using your time. And look, and I think I like the idea of saying, because if you're a working man, you've had a stay-at-home wife, well, yeah, send her some child support, right? She has chosen to have a career taking care of the kids in the house. Like, fix the child support. The money be damned. I'm the last one to care about the money. But if the dad doesn't use his time, or say it's 6 out of 14 days, or 5 out of 14 days, and he's not using his time, look, math is simple. You take what the child support is, divide it by 365. Every day he misses, boom, there's the charge, right? You can get it out of their checks. I've had people that work for me that I've had to take it out of their check and send it in to Tennessee Child Services or whatever. I can't even remember now. It's been a few years since I've had anybody that works with me that I've had to do that with. But whatever it is, Department of Children's Services, I think. Whatever it is, you can figure it out, but you have this behemoth already. These are small tweaks and adjustments to do what should be right anyway. Now, if either parent doesn't use it, if they are using it, and I could give you examples of people I know personally who have gotten divorced and the parent not using the time that was on paper, but negotiated to keep the price down. Fix it. Fix it. Have an easy avenue, because it's also challenging for the women. I know this to be factual. It's challenging to the women to say, gosh, do I want to go back to court to get these, he's not using 60. So this is not just a one-way street. This is a both-way street. Let's make this process easier. Let's make this process easier. I'm not saying free. I'm saying, hey, look, here are the violations. You don't need a week to think about a violation. You don't need a month, 2 months, 3 months to think about a violation. That's pretty easy. That's just math. Let's figure this out and let's make this happen much quicker, because you lost a year waiting on a decision. That was nuts. You lost a year, and then the appeal and everything. That was nuts. That was absolutely nuts. And you can make more money. You get paid twice a month or whatever it is, however it is, everybody gets paid out there. You get paid, you make more money. You're never going to get that year back. Even though it worked out happier for you in the end than it does most people, you still lost a year. It's insane. It's so not right. And for a nation where we care about families and we care about kids and we talk about the importance of parents and both parents being there and being involved, but we also understand the math of more than half of the marriages end in a divorce, why aren't these discussions happening more?
And I think that's we got to have them. We got to be comfortable having them. And I do believe this. I can't believe I'm going to do this, because I will take a swipe at our legislature anytime I can. I don't know that they even know what that this is an issue. You know what I mean? And I do think if they were to realize that, because in the end, I know that I am a very progressive minded person, but my girlfriend jokes with me all the time. She's like, you're a little more traditional than you think you are. I do believe that for a child, a best case scenario is both parents being involved, and a woman can give a child things a man can't, and a man can give a child things in a parenting way that a woman can, right? That does not mean that is the be all end all and the only acceptable way a family should be. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that regardless of the gender or whatever of parents, a child who has two loving adults consistently in their life is more than likely going to have an easier path to being a successful adult than a child who only has one. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the child who only has one is not going to be successful. What I'm saying is, if there are two willing adults who want to love a child and spend time with a child, they should be able to do that as much as humanly possible. And that
Amen.
should be the starting point. That should be the
Exactly.
starting
And very, very well said. Very well said. There's, nothing is perfect and nothing is 100% of the time. But we do know that that does lead to better outcomes. But then when it comes to application, and why is there a variance in all of these states? I mean, honestly, why is, Nevada 50%, in California 32.8%, Arizona and New Mexico 50%, Texas 33%. Why this variance? Are fathers less important in some states than in others? Are mothers less good at nurturing in some states than in others? Like what is the deal here? And I'm a big
point.
small
Here's
government guy. This is going to sound out of character here, but like, why are we not all starting from the same place?
yeah. And now that being said, the way that map and when I read sort of the way that this research was done, it's not necessarily that is the state's starting point, but it's how the judge ends up ruling in the end, right? So in the end,
Okay.
this is the way that this shakes out. Now, that being said, a lot of the ways that judges rule on these things sort of set the precedent for the starting point, right? So if a judge is always ruling every other weekend for the dad, well, eventually that just becomes the starting point. So it's just going to continue to carry over. But once a judge or judges start to equally distribute that parenting time, well, then things shift a little bit. So my assumption is those states that are 50-50 probably started to shift a decade or more ago. And now they've worked their way up to that number. Of course, shit, the way we do things here in the South, we're about 20 years behind on everything. So it's just taking us a little bit longer.
And think about that. Think about what it causes. I mean, what I went through, what you went through, what everybody goes through with a divorce. And I mean, what are your thoughts about my idea of saying, hey, look, family law, family court, divorce, you got a child, therapy, both ends. Both parents have to
Yeah.
get therapy. You got to learn how to relearn how to deal with each other. A lot of stuff that happened with you and your ex was anger. A lot of stuff that happened with me and my ex was anger, right? At some point, and you're not talking to each other to really work it out per se. If you were really good at working things out, probably wouldn't be in that situation, right? Or you would have had a lesser chance to be in that situation. How come we don't say, hey, therapy's good here? You gotta know. I understand that there's like, I had to go to this class. I don't know if you had to
Parenting
go to the
class,
class. Yeah, we went to the one is at the DoubleTree. Big
joke.
waste of time. Big
It's a
waste of time. I guess it's better than nothing, but that's not therapy, and that's no one's getting anything out of a classroom full of 55 people. None of them want to be there. Everybody just seeing how long they can hang out in the bathroom for half a day. You're getting absolutely nothing out of that.
Yep. Yes. And obviously, there are a lot of logistical hoops to jump through if you're going to require therapy. I think if, and of course, we don't know with these other
They
states.
have
There
Zoom
may be
therapy now.
certain,
They have
there may
Zoom
be certain
therapy. This isn't like go
facilities.
sit in a building.
Do what?
They have Zoom therapy. This isn't go sit in a building
Oh
somewhere
no,
in your
no, I know,
town.
I know. I think the therapy thing could come into play is if on the front end, if both parents are like, or at least if one of the parents is like, I want 50-50. Only one
Mm-hmm.
of them has to say that. Then they're like, okay, well here's we want that too. Here's the process to getting that. Then maybe through that therapy, some red flags come up, and the therapist is like, oh no, 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 so and so doesn't need 50-50. Okay, well then you get
Right.
that worked out. But if
Absolutely.
there's no right, if there's no red flag, anything like that, then absolutely, like that needs to happen. And some of these states, maybe the mom or the dad didn't want any of the time, and maybe that's what drugged these percentages down a little bit. Who knows? But the fact of the matter is, again, with family law, there's no evidence, right? Like you don't present this hardcore evidence. It's two
Mhm.
people's stories and their interpretations of truth, and then you have a third party, the judge, who has to hear it, decipher it, and then they make an autonomous decision that affects the rest of the lives of the parties involved. And if you got some old ass judge who's done things the same way forever, and you're me or you, chances are somebody's getting screwed. and it's not the mom.
In the last part of this, and this is another discussion for another day, it's this whole idea of a legal system, of the sharks. My wife now, her grandmother just celebrated her 100th birthday. It is amazing when you live that long. The people that come out of nowhere, from elder care to insurance programs to like the sharks come out. You can see them circling in the water. It is the same way with family law, not with every attorney, but with a whole lot of attorneys. And they brag on when you go, like there are attorneys for the woman. And then these attorneys are probably decent for the dads. And it's like this whole industry, and it doesn't feel as much about specialization. And maybe I'm still just really, maybe it's too recent for me to pick this scab off, but it doesn't feel like specialization as much as it feels like taking advantage of situations. Like it's depending on who you are and if there is any money to be split. Like it's one of these things where it's the shark circling at the end of life care. It's just really awful. And I know you said you went through 3. I went through 2, and so did my ex, and it was the approach that both of the second ones had versus both the first ones. Had COVID not hit, both the first ones had had that thing worked out in just 90 days. And we just signed it, we'd have gone. And the second ones were pistol whipping the hours,
Oh yeah,
the billable
no,
hours.
and I think not to name names now, but I think my third attorney, the one who was like so damn good for me,
Yeah.
was you were probably on the other side of that.
And she pistol whipped my attorney. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable pistol whipping. Completely whipped his ass.
It's,
Embarrassed him. And he was a high priced attorney. I spent 30 grand on legal fees. And it's
whew,
ridiculous.
man, yeah, she's tough. She's tough. Listen,
Yeah, she's real good.
and we'll. I'm not excited. That's the wrong word. I'm looking forward to hearing your story tomorrow night. I think this is so prevalent right now because obviously Father's Day is coming up on Sunday. Um, you know, it, I languished for a long time about my parenting situation. I was sad. I hurt. I missed my daughter all the time. Um, it made it worse because she missed me and she would get very upset when she would have to leave Jackson
Mhm.
or when I would
Mhm.
leave Texas to come back here. And it was very hard, especially the last couple of years that she was living down there. Um, but right now, for these last 3 years, and she's starting her senior year in high school in a couple months, like this feels like a victory lap for me. Like I can finally like breathe a little bit. And there are nights when she'll be in her room and I'll be getting ready, like, locking the doors, turning the lights out, getting settled, getting ready to go to my room. And she's been here 3 years, Chuck. And I'll still lean in and be like, good night, love you. And I'll walk to my room and I will think, like, am I dreaming? Is this real? Because I
Yeah.
never thought that she would be in my house, under my roof every night. And it has been the best thing that has probably ever happened to me. And that I'm not being hyperbolic. I don't like hyperbole. I don't like exaggerations. Um, but I've never worked harder for anything in my life. I will never work harder for anything in my life. I am proudest of whatever I did to make this happen. I will never be prouder of anything that I ever accomplish the rest of my life, no matter how big it is. This is the best thing I will ever do, easily.
Yeah. And that's the part. I hope I hope that people start at the end and work their way back somehow tonight on the podcast, because that's what I want every dad to hear too. Because and it's not that all dads are bad. Some dads are bad, and that sucks. Some dads are defeated and beat up by the process, and that sucks. And then some dads are married for a lifetime and go to Nashville and they serve in the legislature, so they don't think about the other dads who have gone through the other end of this. But regardless of all that, I hope you hear that and say, oh, we got to take care of these people too, and these moms. I mean, we can only tell the story from a father's perspective, but in these moms, I like I said, I was raised by a single mom my entire life. I think I can't remember my mom's past now, but I can't remember the story. But I think before I was even born, they were separated. If not, it was like really quick after. And so it was one of those deals where this isn't a knock on moms. I had shit dad. I had a shit dad, shit biological father, weak ass man, and I feel like we got to do something to make the men want to do it, and then the good dads that are out there, like you, like I try to be, like everybody else tries to do. You got to give them systems in place, because not everybody can bankroll this thing, and it is a thing, and it is a machine. And every time I left a mediation, probably you too, a mediation, a deposition, I wrote a check, not for half, but for whole. And I'm assuming it was the same way for you. That's tough. I mean, $1,000 here, $2,000 there. That wears on most of us. And especially right now, 65% of the population, 70% of the population lives paycheck to paycheck. How many $2,000 checks are you going to write for depositions and mediations that you're going to be able to comfortably do, and then pay your lawyer $400 an hour in a 6-hour, court hearing?
Yeah,
got to have better systems in place.
Got to have better systems. Because like most things in America, the more money you have, the greater access to things working out for you. Boy, I just jumbled all of that up. Basically, the more money you have, the better chance for a successful outcome you'll have. Like, that's just the way that is. It opens so many more doors, even in situations where money really shouldn't play a factor, because when it comes to how much time you have with your kid, that should not be dependent on how much money you make an hour or a year. But it is.
Absolutely.
Because if you want anything to change, you better pony up some fucking money. And if you don't have that money, nothing changes.
And if you work in a restaurant system, restaurant or starting factory job or whatever in this town and in this state, it's an uphill climb. And that's what I have. That's what sickens me the most. Have a level playing field to start, and then work your way backwards. Make your adjustments with the parenting plan. Do child support however you want to do it. I don't care about that at all. I think any dad that talks just about money, I mean, start with your time and then work that out that's fair. Now, you can't have the dad so broke that the time that he gets, he can't use it with his child, right? You can't do that. But I think there are some happy mediums there. I think, I don't know for you, but for me, the parenting plan that we looked at, the way they did calculations based off your income, mother's income, and, depending on how it is, in my case, mine was higher. And so you had to, raise it up. I felt like that was, relatively fair. Alimony is a whole other situation, but I felt like child support was relatively fair. The little formula that they have for that, still keep it, still keep that however you need to.
Yeah. It's fair, but it's like, I get child support now. My ex-wife pays me child support. But it would be, if we lived together, it'd be like her working a part-time job. Like, that's what it would equate to. It would equate to about, I'm trying to just do the quick math in my head, $9,000 a year. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not like it's enough to sort of help. Like, I'm not saying I don't want it, because getting that every month helps. Actually, let me just break this down real quick. It is. Yeah, it's right at 8,600 a year. All right. I'll take it. Sure. But it's not what our income would be if we were married. You know what I mean? I mean, it's
right. And for you to have custody, but you're also not going back to court to get more. You got your kid and you're pretty happy.
Literally all the time. I mean, and that's, she doesn't go to Texas. She goes to Texas once a year. Her mom may come up, every few months for a weekend.
Stay with you?
What's that?
Stay with you?
On the porch. get the swing.
Just saying. After hearing that story, I was pretty sure I knew the answer, but you never know.
No. Look, man,
Well,
I am looking forward to being the interviewer tomorrow night and letting you loose, letting you tell your story.
yeah, yours was interesting and tragic, and the whole time it's just like doing the inside shaking of the head the whole time. I was like, my God, that's what I kept thinking.
But the conversations that you and I have had, just we've never gone in depth on it. We
Mm-mm.
just mentioned it here and there. I feel like
Men
there's some
don't do
things.
that.
What's that?
Men don't do that typically for whatever
No, no,
reason.
no. I don't mind. I don't know. It's not that I'm opposed to it. I just don't think that it's just ever come up. So I think there are a lot of similarities in ours, though. Even though you weren't driving 2 states, it sounds like from what you've told me, every and look, man, I talked to you enough to know how much you love your children and everything that you would do for them. So, like I said, I'm looking forward to hearing your story, especially as we come up on Father's Day tomorrow night. And look, we know not every man's perfect. We can only be held accountable for what we do. And I think you and I both will do whatever we can to make sure that we are in our kids' lives all the time, or as much as we can be. So
Absolutely, 100%.
we'll talk about it tomorrow night, man. See you then.